Hi, everyone. It's so good to meet you. I usually on the other side listening to all these great presentations from folks in the product school. And now I'm excited to share a bit of my knowledge. So I'll start off with a quick intro. As Nikki said, I'm Dianna Yao. I'm a product manager at Facebook, have been here for 4 years. Before that, was at other technology companies like IBM, Google, Rocket Internet. And besides that, I'm also a podcast host on a show called the Emerging Market Startups podcast. I'm obsessed with emerging markets. So if you're also interested, it's a place where I interview folks on the topic, and it's also very product oriented. So with that, what are we talking about today? We're talking about hacking growth. In Silicon Valley, at least, this concept of growth hacking, and you see how I switched it, was intentional, is very popular. And especially at our company, it has been well known, especially given we've grown to 3 billion people. So I'm not necessarily the person that did all that growing to 3 billion people, but every part of us have contributed to that growth. And that concept of growth can be really overwhelming, right? Let's not even think about 3 billion, but thinking about growing to 1 million. And hence today, I'm going to focus on fundamentals of product growth so that next time you have this type of challenge, you're able to go to the fundamentals to help you come up with a plan. So that's my goal today. And we're going to leave questions till the end, but make sure you write them down during so we don't forget them. I don't want you to forget your juicy questions. So 4 parts of the agenda. First, when do you start growing? Because most people assume that you start growing when you feel like growing. We actually have a definition in the industry of when is a good time. Second, what should you be growing? This is around metrics. Third, actually how to grow. So this goes into more of the tactical bits. And fourth, want to give you plenty of case studies from Silicon Valley, but also in other markets. So let's dive into it. All right. When to start growing? That is the old age question. I think in a lot of other normal companies, the answer for them is day one, to start marketing as soon as possible, to get a ton of Facebook and Google ads out there. But in the tech industry, we actually define when you should start growing to hit product market first. This concept of product market fit was started by Mark Andreessen, who said, you want to build something that the market actually wants. And hence this puzzle piece you see here is defining when you've actually built something that people are willing to pay for, are willing to continually stay engaged. Why you don't want to start growing something that doesn't have product market fit is this leaky bucket concept. It's not a theory, it's actually true. So imagine you have a bucket here and you keep dumping water into it, but in that bucket, there are holes, which means no matter how much water you dump into it, at the end of X amount of hours, you'll have no water. And that's the same concept of needing product market fit before you start growing. If you constantly pump in using Facebook ads, Google ads, or pay people to join, but they're not engaged, and over 30 days, they all end up leaving, all that money is essentially wasted. And that's actually how a lot of startups end up running out of money before they find scale. So this is something to be careful of. And even in large companies like ours, it's one of our main golden rules, if there are any. So this leads us into, before I give it away, the question, how do you find product market fit? That's another hard question after when do you grow? So the first way that startups tend to use is they use something kind of like an NPS score or net promoter score. This is an example on the right-hand side from Slack. Early on, they asked the question, How would you feel if you could no longer use Slack? And they gave them a couple choices, very disappointed, somewhat disappointed. So, according to the founder of the term growth hacking, Sean Ellis, who had started it years ago, he had done a number of studies and found that when people were asked this question, if more than 40% of users answered, I would feel very disappointed if they can't use my product, that apparently has an indication of product market fit. And you'll see here on Slack's example, we have over 51% of people saying very disappointed. So obviously, this isn't super scientific, but Sean has done enough research to say that this has worked out in the cases that he had tried. So he had worked at Dropbox and some other companies to help them get huge. And there's another way that is a bit more scientific, but it requires more data. And sometimes for either a product that is just starting out, or a startup that is just starting out, they might not have these. So product market fit, we define it as when you have retention, good retention, significant retention. You'll see here, retention is measured by the concept of 100 users came in day one. By day 100, what percentage of those same users are still using your product? That's what retention means. And you'll see here this curve at the top, week 0, 100%. Then by week 7, they've hit around 35%. That's an arbitrary number. So this is showing some retention / how we might define product market fit. I always get the question, what is a good retention rate? There are some products that are able to thrive on maybe 10%, 5% retention rate. So I don't know if there's a golden rule across the industry, but for certain verticals, there could be some best numbers that are good averages. Here, I would say start with a non-zero retention rate. If you have some retention, that's a good sign. Because imagine you had 5% retention. You might look at that 5%. Who are they? What are their personas? And that could be your early adopters group that you might want to do more marketing and targeting at those people. So say you find that 5% of early adopters are car enthusiasts. And now you have data to arm you with, okay, those are the type of people that are resonating with our product. And hence, I'm going to go market this to them in, a car sales dealership type of company. So we just went through 2 ways of how you're able to find whether your product has product market fit. These are the 3 types of curves, retention curves that you can have from what we just talked about. There's a declining curve, which means you hit 0 retention, that by day 100, none of the users that you brought in day 0 remain to stay. That's usually not a good sign. It is mostly because your product does not have enough value to keep those users from leaving / sticking around. Flattening curve is what we just showed in the last slide. And then smiling curve is an interesting one because you sort of flatten out, but then it jumps back up because maybe after day 100, let's say it's a digital wallet, and after day 100, they save enough money to actually buy something in the app. And that's when engagement can go back up. Okay, so we just went through when to grow. Now, what to grow? This might seem obvious. Everyone thinks, well, we want to grow revenue. Not necessarily the case. And I'll speak to why sometimes thinking of growing revenue in the onset is very dangerous. So first, I'll give you some examples here. In the product world, we always talk about a North Star metric. You've probably heard of it before. And I really see as the North Star metric should be something that defines value to the users or stakeholders in the ecosystem. It's still very abstract. So let me give an example. Here you see in the middle, we talk about Airbnb. Their North Star metric is number of nights booked. And if you think about nights booked, it is good for the guest, the host, and Airbnb. For the guest, they're looking for a room for the night. So if a night is booked, if they're able to book a room, that's great for them. For the hosts, they're looking to make more money from the place they're renting out, also good for them. Airbnb, they earn a percentage for every transaction that happens between a host and a guest. So also good for them. The more nights booked, the higher absolute value they're getting because they take something like 10%. So that is a good North metric because it is accomplishing the goal of all three stakeholders. And I won't go through other examples, but this is how you want to come up with a great North Star metric to set as a goal to grow. Of course, besides the North Star metric itself, you want to set more tactical goals for ones that you're able to move. Okay, so let's go further down the Airbnb example. What I mean by that, when you think about nights booked, I kind of just showed you that it is a formula. Nights booked equals the total number of users, the percentage of those users that are active, whether it's guests or host, and the number of nights on average per active user. So maybe on average, the active guest is booking 20 nights a year. And you also want to know on the supply side, the active listings out of all the total listings. So if you were able to have general numbers for these, you would have a rough idea of the number of nights booked just from this semi-formula. These are some examples, this is not the total formula. And here it also helps you project your goals. So something as a product manager that you're responsible for doing is working with their data scientists to come up with a forecast by the end of the quarter, by the end of the half/6 months. How many, in Airbnb's case, nights booked do we expect? That's one way to look at it. The right-hand side is another way to think about how to pick specific areas to optimize. And you guys might have heard of the concept of a funnel. If you think about the funnel for nights booked, first thing, a host has to create a listing. Second, the guest searches by city and filters. The guest views the listing, so they click on, well, that's the one after. They click on the listing to see the details of it. And then at the end, they pay/book. This funnel is important because each step of the way, there could be additional friction that you can remove to help users get closer towards your end goal, which is nights booked. So for example, let's say the create listing, when Airbnb started, they asked the host for 50 different types of information, which decreased the amount of people who actually had a completed listing. They started optimizing and they reduced 50 to 20 fields that a host would have to fill out. Then they maybe saw a jump in 5% of additional listings that came up. So this is how a funnel could be really useful. Okay, so we just talked about what to grow, again, North Star metrics, and then breaking down those North Star metrics. Now, the third part is how to grow. Because now we've determined that our product has product market fit because of retention. We now know that we want to grow nights booked for Airbnb. The big question now is, how do we actually do it? What tactics? What do we do? So we have this concept at our company: understand, identify, execute. And a key part of this is understanding where your product is currently at. And some of this encompasses of what I just mentioned, drawing out that funnel. Where are there drop-offs in that funnel? So maybe in Airbnb's case, the drop-off in the funnel was the host creating a list because they had to enter 50 field. Maybe it was at the pay/book because a guest was asked for too many details to actually book the place. Or let's say in the search, there was a missing filter. So all of these are ways you want to understand where the drop-off point in the funnel is to further optimize. Because when you pour more people at the top who becomes aware of your product, you want to make sure they're getting through the flow to accomplish the main thing that they're there to do that is tied with your revenue. So that's the understand portion. And then I kind of talked about identify. Identify is which of that flow/funnel is under optimized, or which part of that flow is key to the conversion and/slash adoption of your product, and narrowing into that to get your team around to say, this is where we want to target. So a real example on my team, let's give an example of an enterprise product. Assume you're selling it to employees at the company, not necessarily to like the VP, the CTO. Sometimes setting up a product, an enterprise product, or starting to use it can be really difficult. And maybe you've identified getting the employee to set it up for the first time. We're making them jump through so many hoops. So that's the identify. And then the execute portion is then you saying, okay, let's make the setup process for them easier. Let's give them more guidance, maybe, to walk them through. So that's a typical way of how I would structurally think about what to grow, where to grow. Some tactical things when we just talked about conversion rates. That's what I meant, not conversation rates. Those, though that would be nice too. The first one, you want to shorten your funnel. So I just talked about this twice, so I won't go into it, but reducing the number of steps and friction it takes for the user to get to success. The second one, I like this because we all live in a world with too many options. Limit the number of options that you're showing the user. So there was a study done, I don't know when, but they showed, what was it? 26 types of jams. And they tested versus B, they showed 3 types of jams. And can you guess of the two, of which 2 people bought more jams? It was the one where they showed 3 options. So more options actually causes people cognitive overload, or a way where they have to do more work to decide. So giving them less options increases the chances that they actually pick something. Of course, making sure those options are things that they actually would want. Or setting smart defaults, I forgot that as well, is another good tactic. A smart default, for example, instead of, if you're on an e-commerce site, instead of asking for your address over and over again after every time you book, them allowing you to default to the address that you tend to select as the address that you would like to have things sent to. The third one is retargeting users. So how many of us have been in the middle of buying something on Amazon, and we totally forget because we had a friend distract us or call us? So hence assume that users are bombarded by information, and hence retargeting them on where they left off or what they were viewing is a good way to then re-engage them and remind them that they were in the middle of something, whether they wanted to complete that transaction. Number 4, clear call to action. So content is majorly important. We had done, or in the industry, there's testing that's been done that shows if I put buy now, learn more, or some other CTA, which actually performs better. And you think it doesn't maybe make a difference, but the differences between them, at least on the data side, have shown to be statistically significantly different in terms of how often people click them. So testing copy, making buttons bigger, making it stand out with color, move it up. Those are things people like to make fun of us in the industry for moving buttons or coloring buttons differently, but they actually have a major impact. I mean, a small thing I'll bring up, which always makes me smile. In the design world, they make certain buttons have a drop shadow, which apparently allows more affordances, which basically means people have more of a tendency to feel like it's something to click. So that's a small design thing that has an impact. The 5th one, create urgency in the product flow. I'll give you an example later, so I won't talk too much about it. And 6, this is a big one. If you're expanding to other countries, localization and showing the users the right language will immensely increase their comprehension and increase the chances that they want to engage with your product. It is the worst when you go to a restaurant, the menu's in a totally different language, and you either leave or you're scratching your head and it's a tough time. So same with your product, make it easy for the users. Okay, so these are some examples. We'll go into examples now. We talked about retargeting. Here's one I got from Nordstrom where I didn't complete the transaction. So they sent me this thing where it asked, oh, are you still thinking it over? And I was looking at that blue dress. So it reminded me and it got me, well, I didn't buy it still, but it was a really great and ingenious way in case I didn't order it the first time because I forgot. Creating urgency. How many of you have been on booking.com and have seen these urgency clock countdown things and you feel a bit stressed, but you're like, okay, it means I have to book this now. So you see here, deal of the day expires, there's a countdown. Only 7 beds left on our site. So all of these are creating urgency so the user does this now. Why this was especially important for bookings.com, because when you book a hotel and your vacation is 3 months later, people tend to book the month before. So in the beginning, they're shopping. And for bookings, they want to help hotels make sure their nights are booked way in advance to be able to project. So this was a key component for them to get more bookings. Localization, I mentioned, is really important. Imagine you see this on your screen. For those who don't speak Chinese, if I look at this, I would have no idea how to engage with this. So assume when we're showing people an English product, when their native tongue is not English, this is the same way they would feel. Okay. Another set of related tactics. You want to target the right people at the right place at the right time. That sounds obvious, but to actually do it has a huge impact. And I'll go through some examples. So 1, targeting the right people. Most people, when I think about their persona, they're thinking moms, age 32. That's demographic. But what's even more impactful is targeting behaviors. So let's say instead of narrowly targeting moms, you want to target the behavior of people who tend to buy kids' toys. But that might not just be the mom. could be grandparents, it could be friends that are buying gifts for a baby shower. So that nets you a larger addressable market than if you were narrowly targeting the demographic. The second one, make your product easy to find. So that again sounds obvious, but let's go into more detail. You want to place the entry points of your product in somewhere that people can find it. Sometimes I play around with products and I want to like delete something, and the delete button is buried 5 layers in to the point I can't find it, which in that case, it's probably on purpose. The delete my account button is probably on purposely hidden. But for your product where you want users to know about it, you probably don't want it to be 5 layers in. So put it somewhere where it's obvious and where it doesn't take 10 clicks to get to it. Third one, meet people where they're at. We tend to market in a way where we expect the user to come to us. So say I'm doing marketing for a new product, and the only place I put that marketing is on my website. But most of my users might not be aware of my website. So my question would be, where are most of my users spending their time? Let's say if it was a fashion, let's actually do a healthcare, health and fitness one. So there's a company called Gymshark, and what they do is they partner with influencers that are fitness influencers on YouTube, because they know the people that are their target group are those that are watching these videos on YouTube to exercise. So with that, they're meeting people where they're at already versus pulling them to the Gymshark website. I've never been on the Gymshark website, but I've seen their products so often because I do workouts on YouTube. And number 4, time it right. This is also utterly important. You think about if you're targeting someone at work, they're probably not likely to engage with a game product. But if we target them right after work while they're in the train, that is the perfect time where they're like, oh, I actually need this. And again, more willing to engage. So I went through a bunch of tactics. The TLDR, or the summary, is growth really is a game of inches, which means from some of the tactics that I gave, they might increase your completion rate, your adoption rate by 1%, 5%. It seems, not very big. But when you add them all up, that is how we got to our 3 billion users today, experimenting and having this very methodological approach and very diligent approach. And when we talk about experimentation, it's coming up with a bunch of hypotheses and being willing to test versus being stuck on one way to implement, one way to show users something. What else is next? This is the type of curve you want to see, it going up and to the right. J-curve is what we call it. Case studies. I went through a couple of examples already, but I'll breeze through a couple more you guys are probably familiar with. So leveraging network effects. On the left-hand side, if any of you guys have used Robinhood, when they first came out with the product and people couldn't use it, they had people, First, you were asked to sign up. Then you were told how many people are ahead of you. And if you were interested in priority access, they asked you to join more people. They asked you to refer more people. So you see how that's like growth hacky? Because people could move up the line if they invited more people, hence growing the number of people that knew about Robinhood. And again, this was free, right? They didn't pay ads. They didn't pay to show up on Google. I mean, they maybe did, but this was probably their largest contributor in growth. Another 2 Again, sort of network effects. There's a company called Superhuman. You also probably know of Hotmail. They both use the same tactic, which is for their free version, anytime someone sent an email to the other person, at the very bottom, it would show sent with Superhuman or Hotmail. And that was Hotmail's growth strategy. They ultimately got to 12 million users using just that. Because think about it, how many emails are you sending to different people? And when you send that, they're becoming aware that this product exists. PayPal, early on, they were giving $5 for people that were referring friends. That also was a huge contributor to PayPal's growth. And then on the right-hand side, it's my personal favorite product. You might have not heard of it before, but it's a fitness app, and it asks you to invite your friends to join you for that workout. So these are product growth things because they don't necessarily use the traditional ways of marketing on Google, on Facebook, but instead it's leveraging your network effects and people and word of mouth for people to learn about this product. But in order to get people to refer, like you'll remember, you'll have to make sure your product is valuable. Otherwise, people might not put themselves on the line to refer a product that they don't even enjoy. Scarcity works. If any of you guys in the Bay Area, or it's not a global product, but Clubhouse is the hottest and latest thing. In order to get into Clubhouse, you have to be invited by someone. And then when you invite people, once you're in, you also get more credits. So here, making something less available ends to have this opposite effect. And that was actually how Facebook got started too. They had limited it to certain college campuses, and they slowly opened that up more and more. But it was because of that exclusivity that I think a lot of people were driven to the network. Grow physically in emerging markets. On the left-hand side is a picture from Kenya. There's a fintech company called M-Pesa. And what they do, which they learned from all the telecom companies, is just plaster buildings with the brand, with the color, so that there's more brand recognition. And I won't go through that one. And that's it. So we roll through it really fast. And again, happy to answer questions and deep dive in any of the areas. But you can find me on LinkedIn if I don't get to your question this time around.
Thank you so much, Dianna. So yeah, we have some time for some questions now, and we can take questions from anyone directly. So if you want to turn off your mic and ask a question, feel free. And if not, I will read some of the questions that we got during the presentation. So if anyone would like to ask a question now.
There's the brave soul. How much time do we have for questions?
We have about, let's say 5 to 10 minutes for questions. So let's say 5 minutes.
Yeah. I went a little long, sorry.
No worries. It was great information. So if no one has one from I think I see someone. Someone? No? All right. Well, I'll go ahead and just take one from the chat, and then we'll give some people more time to think of some questions. So Baven wants to know, how do you incorporate price discovery and monetization hypothesis as part of validating the product market fit?
How do you incorporate product discovery?
Price discovery, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
monetization.
And what was the last to determine?
As part of validating the product market fit.
Okay. Whoever wrote that question, if I'm not going down the right direction, clarify it. But what I'm thinking is, in the beginning, in order to even get to product market fit, people have to know about the product. It's not everyone, but still a small amount to get some usage, to measure things like retention. So when you think about product discovery, at least at our company, we're lucky to have a platform a ton of people are using. So sometimes we use areas or parts of our product where there's already a lot of eyeballs, and make sure to bring our product there so that they're aware. People send out emails to a small subset of your active users. in order to get that initial product discovery. In terms of monetization, if you want to test for that, sometimes people use like the fake door test, where they show 3 different options for payment options and test how many people click on each of them to see which ones is actually more agreeable to a user. So those are some ways to test where you'll to land on what type of monetization scheme and how to get some product discovery.
That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Bhavin.
Just a quick follow-up on that is, do you consider an important part of the product market fit? I guess I think it probably depends on whether your goal is to get acquire customers or monetize it. But I was just curious as to like whether monetization should be an important part of product market fit or not.
Yeah, definitely. Because people show the ultimate engagement by voting with their wallet. So when you are determining retention, that part should also encompass of, are people paying for it? Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we have more questions. I'm going to try to well, I'm just going to read this question from the chat, and I'm going to try to, yeah, let me know if you get it. So, could you provide an example of some of the toughest challenges as a product manager for user onboarding? You approached scaling a product internationally, and what first steps would you recommend for anyone creating a go-to-market strategy for a new market? So it's 2 parts. I can read the first part.
Yeah, we're getting some really long questions. Yes.
Yeah, we got some detailed questions.
It's totally okay. I usually so I heard expanding to international markets and how
And so example of some of the challenges expanding to user on onboarding when you're trying to scale internationally, and then what are the first steps you recommend for anyone creating a go-to-market strategy?
Got it. Okay. The first one I have down now. So I worked on a product that was expanding in Kenya. I think the major challenge there was not understanding how users were using apps, how often they were to download it. And my first go to there is always understand how the user uses certain technical products. Okay. Again, very general, but let me go down deeper. In that example, I didn't realize that Kenyans had a different behavior than us when we buy data credits. For us, we sign for a monthly bill. For them, they're literally topping up on a daily basis or even a weekly basis. And they're usually maybe buying 50 megabits of credit. And that was important for the product I was working on, which is helping people get more access to internet. So always start from the understand stage when we said of understand, identify, execute. And then from there, once we knew that, we built a product that actually followed their behavior of only wanting to put in a small amount of money. So when we did monetization, instead of creating a pack that was for 30 days, we created a pack that was for 1 week and for 1 hour to meet them where they were at. Second part of the question, go-to-market strategy. Going back to the same principle, understanding where are first identifying what users you want to target, whether it's the early adopters, whether it's those with a certain behavioral characteristic or demographic. And then once that is very clear, or at least your first iteration of it, where do these people hang out? Where are they spending time? So let's say we talk about people, an example from Uber. Early on, they knew drivers were hanging out in certain locations that cab drivers would be at. So they had people physically go to where cab driver stops were in the city and recruit them. So figure out where your people are at and target them, whether it's physically or online.
Yeah. I have a question if you still have some time.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the one who wrote that detailed question. So I just want to give a bit context.
Yeah.
So I was wondering about the role of product managers in growth as in day-to-day operations. So you're most definitely contributing to the growth of your company through the products you're developing. But there are these growth people and marketeers taking care of growth, and you're most busy with product development cycles. You're most busy within that. So how do you contribute to the growth of your company besides what you got to offer with the products you develop or manage?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really depends on company. To be honest, in our company, the product manager, unless you're a growth product marketing, unless you're a growth product manager, the responsibility doesn't fall on us. We have counterparts called growth marketing analysts. But if you're a smaller company startup, the product manager definitely, that responsibility befalls on them. And I think the first thing they have to charter is the understand portion. Going back to that, for me, the current product I'm working on, I was asking, so where are SMB business owners? Like where do they look for information? And we found out there are certain websites or influencers that they follow on Instagram. And from that, we're able to figure out, okay, how do we maybe partner with some of these influencers or get our product on these sites? So as a product manager, helping the team get the understand and the research, either from a researcher or Googling, is what I did initially. And then bringing that information back to the team for the engineers to build. Oh, well, for first the team to brainstorm on what you guys can do with the insight that you're bringing. And then if there needs to be engineering work or marketing work, having them execute it with you.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Sure. All really great questions. Any more, Nikki?
Yeah, so we can take one more question. If anyone wants to turn on their mic. If not, I have one question I can pull from the chat, and then we do have to close it out. But thank you so much for all the questions. They're really great. If anyone wants, okay. And then I'm gonna choose one of the questions from the chat, which is if you have any framework that you follow to discover a new segment of people to maximize growth.
To discover a new segment of people. I think one thing our data scientist likes to do is using lookalike groups. So he builds a model where, again, behavioral, we find who are the people that clicked on our product or who set up our product. Then he'll use a machine learning algorithm to find what are the characteristics of those people. We probably, it's not being brought as insight to us necessarily. And then finding cohorts of people that have similar characteristics. So that's a really technical way to do it. But for us, I talked about early on, sometimes we find product market fit with that 5%. And I'm asking myself, who are those 5% of people? And what I do is I just take a sample within that 5% that's like statistically significant. Let's say that 5% is 100 people. I find 10 of those 100 people and I look at their profiles and see, oh, okay, 5 out of 10 of these people tend to be like this. Then 5 out of the rest of the 5 tend to be like this. So I look for patterns, and it really is pattern matching. When you have a small cohort, it's harder to be scientific about it, but this is like a fast way that even I utilize. And sometimes it can lead you wrong, but you can increase your confidence by looking at a larger group. So instead of 10, looking at 30 out of 100.